Joe Sparrow!
Joe Sparrow truly is the Johnny Bravo we don't deserve, but the one we need. Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And I have heard your cries out there on the interwebs. You guys want more Amphibia? I am here for more Amphibia because holy dang! The show just keeps getting better and better and better. And the most recent episode that we had, the first temple, had a ton to go over. I know that the internet and YouTube have already been exploding with all different kinds of theories and breakdowns and whatnot. And I'm going to give a writer's spin on what we saw in last week's episode. Now, the way I want to tackle so much, because there really is so much, and without going like for another half hour to an hour of me just blabbing on, I am going to address a couple of things. I'm going to talk about the world building. I'm going to talk about the use of foreshadowing here in this episode, and I'm going to talk about the brilliant character development that was played out in this episode. So let's dive a little bit here into the world building first and foremost. This is honestly one of the things that visual media can do so much better than written media can. I mean, I'm a writer. I love just going deep into all different kinds of aspects of my different worlds, my different stories, my characters. There's just so much that I do in my own brain that I want to put out onto the page, but it's hard to do that without making the story feel bloated and bogged down in tons and tons of world building. The best that you can really do as a writer is sprinkle in throughout your entire story all of these little tidbits about your world and have just some really cool scenes as you go along that really put the reader into the context and feel and atmosphere of your world. However, visual media, like animation, can really just take you and dump you right into the middle of everything. I mean, a forest of fungi and trees that look like brains? Like, this is incredible. Sure, you can write about it, but being able to see it visualized entirely there on the screen is phenomenal. The entire temple is an absolute beauty to see. It is so well animated, so well drawn, and there's so many freaking details going on here. Not only is this temple ancient, not only does this temple have the freaking prophecy right there on the wall, not only does this temple have tons and tons of codes for us to find, but this temple has details about Amphibia's past. And this is where so many things began coming together for me. I have looked at the city of Newtopia for the longest time as a great replica of the city of Rome. Rome was this ancient city-state that grew over many, many years to become a vast, powerful empire, one of the greatest empires in human history. And what we see here in Amphibia is we see this ancient, not quite derelict city, because it's still very much thriving, but an ancient city kind of past its prime. And it just has so many wonderful Roman feels to it. And the way that Amphibia is ruled, it's kind of like a very loose monarchy empire where the newts rule from Newtopia. The frogs just kind of do their thing. They pay their taxes, and the toads make sure that the taxes get to where they're supposed to go, and they enforce the laws that have supposedly been written up by the newts, people like King Andreas. However, the temple gives us so much more. As we look throughout the temple, we see all of these different hints for the stars. What we are seeing right here is this. Amphibia is an ancient star-faring empire. World hopping has been a thing for potentially thousands of years on this planet. The Calamity Box isn't just some old ancient artifact that was at one point used by the newts. No, they had a connected empire across many different planets. What I thought previously was just kind of like a trophy chamber or like a menagerie of different things that the newts had taken from different planets underneath the palace. No! these are the relics of a bygone age when Amphibia was at the center of a mighty empire. Suddenly now what we see from King Andreas's book about the Calamity Box makes a whole lot more sense. Yes, they conquered. They didn't just conquer, they had an empire. When we look at the murals, we see that the newts are holding stars. They're looking up to the stars. And this now begins to put so much more into context. What is the knight? Well, we've been wondering what the knight is. Is the knight this giant flame-holding frog like what we see in the opening card? Or is it this giant eyeball ball monster that Andreas is talking to? Probably far more likely the knight that is referred to in the prophecy is something out there beyond the stars. It's very likely then that whatever was done to stop Amphibia from having its space empire was done in part to prevent the knight from arriving to the planet. Now, we don't really know. That's kind of theorizing. That is totally theorizing. It's not just kind of. That is theorizing on my part. However, it begins to put a lot into context. And I just think it's super cool that we are getting this glimpse into Amphibia's past through its temple. And it begins to tell us a whole lot more of what's going on. And it has a really neat connection to the very end of the episode where King Andreas is speaking right before his master. This eyeball ball thing. I have no idea what to call it, so I'm just going to keep on calling it the eyeball ball. So yeah, on the matter actually then of bringing up the ending, because that does have something to do still with the world building, and it also progresses the plot a little bit, I think then that we can probably guess that King Andreas, though he talks about getting revenge, I do believe that he is also looking forward to rebuilding and reestablishing Amphibia's ancient empire. That he wants to reconnect Amphibia with all of these other planets and rebuild what he believes his people lost. And, you know, in a way, that's actually like a pretty good starting motivation for him, but obviously something happened. The Calamity Box ended up on Earth. It wasn't supposed to go there. Or maybe that was all part of the plan initially. Maybe King Andreas was probing Earth for potential conquest. And those who left the box on Earth, potentially Sprig and Polly's parents, we don't know yet, put it there to make sure that King Andreas could not get his grubby mitts on the Calamity Box and follow through with his plan, because his plan very likely is going to invite the knight back to the planet of Amphibia and could potentially overwhelm everything and destroy the world like we see in the prophecy. And this also is just super interesting and everything because King Andreas wants to thwart the prophecy. Suddenly now this throws so much into question of what we thought we knew. And I think it's really, really cool. This isn't so much world building as it is character progression. And I said I'd tackle this later on, but I do want to address it right here. I think that this is really cool character progression on the part of King Andreas, that he is actually a very complicated villain right here. So sure, we can say that he was originally motivated probably to rebuild the Amphibian Empire, but now he wants revenge, and he's willing to get revenge at the potential risk to his own people. This is really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to when we learn more about what King Andreas is planning and why he's doing what he's doing. So now, I want to move on from world building. There's just so much more still about the temple and everything, but I mean, I could go on for a very long time here about that, so I want to move on to the concept of foreshadowing. One of the things that Amphibia does very, very well as a series is that it provides foreshadowing for things to come. I think a really good example of this is actually Stumpy's Diner. When we watch the early episodes of Amphibia, we see that there are references to Stumpy's Diner, and it definitely already gives us this impression that it's going to be a very derelict place. So when we finally get to the episode where Anne decides to help out Stumpy, honestly, this episode has been set up in many different ways, not just by little visual cues to Stumpy's Diner in the background, but also other stuff about just who Anne is, her Thai background, and everything else like that. It's kind of neat. It's not anything really super serious, but it was a really neat way of setting up just this fun little episode. There's also a lot of subtle clues leading up to Anne and Sasha having their big throwdown and really revealing Sasha's toxicity as a friend. And this, I think, is really, really neat, because oftentimes when we think of foreshadowing, we think of something very big, something kind of ominous. We're like, that has raised a flag, and I'm now looking forward to when that pays off. And yeah, that's how foreshadowing is generally done. What I think is actually very, very excellent foreshadowing is when the creators are able to hide clues in plain sight that build up to a cool reveal. Right here in the first temple, we get awesome foreshadowing. We get foreshadowing to the reveals that we're going to get about Amphibia's past, because believe you me, we are going to learn a lot about what Amphibia once was. And we've received a lot of neat foreshadowing about the fact that Amphibia was once a star-faring empire, that they jumped from planet to planet, because Frobo, who comes from these ancient ruins that are very clearly amphibian, that's spacefaring technology. And the eyeball monster is also in a cell that is futuristic. So that means that the Newts at one point had access to greater technology. And so that's kind of cool. Like, it makes all of these little connections, and it tells us that as the story progresses, we are going to see more of this world hopping, and we are going to see the technology of the past, which is super futuristic. And I really, really like how that works out. In any case, moving on actually probably to the more important foreshadowing, we get foreshadowing about Marcy. Now, this is something where I have to kind of explain myself a little bit more, because Marcy absolutely is a cinnamon roll. And honestly, she hasn't been giving off any sort of evil vibes or anything like that. But we have been told that she has toxic traits, and this episode highlighted, once again, one of those traits. And I'm so happy I called this early on when I did my Tale of Four Friendships video. I said that Marcy had a disconnect from reality, and we absolutely got that in this episode. All of her going into the zone kind of a thing. And absolutely, she went to the zone, but it wasn't just her going into the zone. She absolutely treated life like a game. Once again, it's a good thing that Marcy isn't a murder hobo. Otherwise, Amphibia would be in so much trouble right now. Because once she goes into that little game world in her head, everything changes. Now, she did snap out of it, and she did help save Anne and the Plantars from the wicked game of Flipwart, but she hasn't fully addressed that issue yet. Also, once again, we get that really neat puzzle where when they're looking at the tiles, and the clue is, don't be jealous of my hue, and she figures out, oh, green with envy. Once again, Marcy has said that she is envious of Anne. And so I think that when we look at what's going on here with Marcy, we know that Marcy can easily disconnect herself from reality, and Marcy is prone to jealousy. Now, does that make her as wicked as Sasha has been portrayed in the series? No, not really. In fact, actually, kind of going back to the promo art for Season 2, we see that a lot of the antagonistic characters are shaded very dark. Marcy's interesting because where Anne and the Plantars are in the forefront, and they are very well lit, signifying that these are the heroes and the good guys, Marcy is partly shadowed and also partly illuminated. Partly shaded, partly illuminated sounds a little bit better. So we're good with that one right there. But what this means right here is this. Marcy isn't as bad as Sasha, but Marcy has issues that she needs to work out. And this episode foreshadows that we are going to encounter those issues still later on down the road. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more here in just a second, because I do want to also talk about how the temple itself foreshadows what kinds of challenges Marcy is going to face, and she didn't recognize it. She was so in the zone for tackling these different kinds of problems that had she paid attention to the door and the murals, she would have seen those trials, that she would have seen the cube, the Flipwart game, and the tiles. but she didn't. She was just caught up in the euphoria of solving a riddle and just plowing on into the next puzzle. Marcy needs to stop and think. And that's one of the problems that Marcy has. When she's in the zone, she doesn't fully take into account her surroundings or the people around her. She didn't realize until Anne was pummeling the snot out of Hop Pop that the game was hurting her friends. And I think that we're definitely going to see that play out even more so later on down the road. Now, once again, she did make the right choice. But if she doesn't make the right choice in time, something bad might happen, which once again is kind of foreshadowed by the Season 2 opening. So now let me start bringing everything together as I talk about great character progression. Because in order to fully understand what's going on with Marcy, we actually have to look at Anne and Hop Hop. I am so happy that there is some serious fallout for the episode after the rain. Because that episode, honestly, while it was really good, did not pack the emotional punch I thought it would. I felt like Anne really forgave Hop Hop rather quickly. Now, once again, I was just like, okay, well, this is a kid's show, so obviously we're going to move on with that. I am seriously happy that the first temple shows that this is still a problem, that now there are some trust issues. And I love the fact that they haven't yet fully figured it out, but that they are figuring it out. It shows once again just how important good communication is. This goes all the way back to the episode Best Franz, where Hop Hop tells Anne and Sprig that their friendship is now stronger than ever because they're actually talking. And now Hop Hop and Anne are actually talking. This means that there can be true reconciliation. This is great because while Anne has developed a lot as a character, she can still grow. She still has room for growth, and I love that we're getting that. And Hop Hop as well has room for growth. And I am so excited because, once again, foreshadowing right here, Hop Hop holds himself accountable for the fact that he was away when the Herons attacked Wartwood and killed Sprig and Polly's parents. He feels responsible for that, and he's trying to make up for it. What this really means is then, at some point, Hop Hop is going to have to be there for his family, and Anne is part of his family. And I think that that will be the moment where Hop Hop truly redeems himself, not just to Anne, but to himself. This is setting up everything for some great character development. We're already getting great character development, and this foreshadows even more to come. I am so excited for this. Now, what does this all mean for Marcy? Well, just like Hop Hop and Anne's issues are going to take longer to work themselves out, Marcy's toxic traits have not been solved. She hasn't worked through them yet. They have been identified. Envy and disconnect. But just because you have identified the problems does not fix them. Marcy has not yet had her moment where she has fully addressed them. Yes, Marcy has made the right decisions, which is why, once again, she is not completely shaded in darkness in the promo art, because she will make the right choices as time goes on. She's a good character, but she has not yet addressed those two issues. She now knows she full on admits she's a problem with disconnect, that once she's in the zone, she's in the zone. But how can she prevent herself from going into that zone and abandoning her friends until she realizes that they're getting hurt? Being in the zone is perfectly fine, but she has to also recognize who else is around her, what else is going on around her, and make the correct choices. She has a lot of growing up to do there. She's also envious. How will that play out? I don't exactly know. But I have the feeling that envy is going to play a big role in the season finale, especially for Marcy. So there we have it. The first temple. There's so much going on. And holy dang. When talking about world building and foreshadowing and character progression, I should also take some time, just because I know everyone else is, to talk about the ritual and the ending monster, because I need to throw my hat into this ring and bring stuff up right here. Clearly, these temples are not exactly what they appear to be. King Andreas has been manipulating Marcy beautifully with the information that he gives her. The temples are meant to recharge the Calamity Box. However, the girls were not supposed to go there until they had fulfilled the prophecy. And that's really interesting right there. That means that the girls are the source of the magic, not the temples. And that's super cool. That ties into the idea that, you know what, you are the source of your own power. You are your own hero or your own worst enemy. That's a really neat idea right there that they're playing into, with the girls being the source of their own power. Marcy has already sacrificed her power to empower the gem, which is going to help lead them to Anne's temple and then eventually to Sasha's temple. This is going to be really interesting to see how the girls react after all of this. Now then, this doesn't mean that they actually lose their different qualities or their different traits. Not at all. Marcy is still brilliant. Anne is still going to be full of heart and courage and awesomeness, and Sasha is still going to be strength and determination. But this probably means that there's some actual magic embedded or intertwined with their character traits. And once again, this is really interesting because they need that magic to defeat the knight. And this could be something really, really cool right here. Because what if this means that for the girls, they have to sacrifice the prospect of going home in order to save Amphibia? Which, this brings up an excellent question. Are they willing to accept Amphibia as their new home? This brings up a lot of very interesting questions. Who knows if we'll actually see this play on out? But I think it's really neat that the temples were actually meant to be the end game for the girls after they fulfilled the prophecy and not something beforehand. Now, this plays really well into King Andreas' plans right here. It's very clear once again that he has Marcy right in the palm of his hand. And this just once again solidifies the fact that I love this jolly evil giant. Honestly, this guy is so much fun to have on screen. I am looking forward to having more of King Andreas. His whole scene right there with General Yunnan is an interesting one because it makes it seem like he's really disengaged. But the thing, though, is this. I believe he actually is very much engaged with what is going on, but he is playing 4-dimensional Flipwart while everyone is playing traditional 2D Flipwart. King Andreas has much, much bigger plans in mind, and for him, he knows that any sort of Toad rebellion, any sort of Frog rebellion, does not matter so long as he has the Calamity Box and he can subvert the prophecy. Now, for this eyeball ball monster that he's got there in the palace, he calls his master. He's clearly working with it or for it. And that really threw me for a loop right there because he seems to be more like the Grand Master Plan kind of a guy. Which, this, at least for me, this once again means that he had his own grand plans until these plans were ruined. And it kind of leads me back to his menagerie underneath the palace. There is a painting that's ripped up all Beauty and the Beast style that most likely contains the images of his friends who probably betrayed him once they realized what he was up to. And this just gives so much meaning to his words to Marcy. It's so sad when friends leave and everything like that. King Andreas is a character who has been hurt. And rather than learning from his mistakes and trying to become a better person, he has become a villain. And this is really cool right here because King Andreas can serve as a model for who any of the 3 girls could become. That is awesome to me. That we already see kind of an endgame for who these girls could become if they don't patch up their relationships and band back together and overcome their own toxic traits and then go on to fulfill the prophecy. Now, as for the eyeball ball monster, I honestly have no answers at this moment for what on earth he could be. If I really wanted to get tinfoil hat theorizing right here, I would say that this is a monster from the Nightmare Realm and that it's a buddy of Bill Cipher's. Is that the case? Probably not. However, I will say this, as far as interconnectivity goes, there's a whole bunch of axolotls in the first temple. And who is one of the great gods of the universe in Gravity Falls? the axolotl. I am still working on my theory about the interconnected stories between the different cartoons. I've decided to wait just a little bit longer because Amphibia is coming out with even more information, and I want to have all of that before I present to you guys my pretty much ironclad theory. So, that's everything for me right now. The first Temple episode, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And if you have watched this whole thing and you have not watched Amphibia, yeah, sorry, I gave you a whole bunch of spoilers. Oops, a little bit late for that. In any case, sit down, binge Amphibia if you haven't done so already. It is awesome. And if you have already watched all of Amphibia, then you know what you should do with your time? You should head on over to Camille's Harem, our podcast, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have excellent writing advice there for all of you novice writers out there. We also have a lot of fun reading some horrible stories, and we just have a really great time there. We really hope that you come and check us out, or you can also contact us over at our subreddit or at our Discord. Links for all those sites are in the description, or feel free to drop a like or drop a comment down the comment section. That is awesome as well. I would love to talk Amphibia with more of you guys out there because it's a fantastic show. I got so much I want to say, but I'm not just going to pontificate into the vacuum of the internet forever. So, with all that being said, this video's already run on longer than I thought it would. So, until the next video, y'all, tschüss.